Is history shaped by great people? The Caesars, Napoleons, Lincolns, Churchills, and Gandhis of the world? Probably not. Although there are famous men and women with a great deal of impact, innumerable factors out of any individual's control are the forces that drive history. Yet if there is any person in Europe today who might live up to the reputation of shaping tomorrow's historical imagination, it could be Mario Draghi, the Prime Minister of Italy who was just forced to resign. Who is Mario Draghi? Why was he Prime Minister? What did he accomplish? And will his legacy last? Welcome to the Deep Dive. Mario Draghi, born in Rome in 1947, has built a resume that speaks for itself. Harvard-trained economist, academic, world banker, Goldman Sachs banker, governor of the Bank of Italy, president of the European Central Bank, and finally, Prime Minister of Italy. It's no wonder that Draghi has been given the affectionate nickname Super Mario. On the 26th of July 2012, when the future of the euro was in deep doubt at the height of the European debt crisis, Mario Draghi, then president of the European Central Bank, gave a speech in London where he delivered the now famous commitment to save the European single currency, whatever it takes. This commitment was followed up with a barrage of policies that saved Italy, Greece, and other southern European countries from a potentially imminent default, and therefore the euro itself. Mario Draghi was the preeminent manager of a crisis that nearly broke the EU and the economy of his home country. In so doing, he proved his mettle, establishing a nearly legendary reputation as a man who could address problems no one else could. What was Italy like, politically and economically, before Draghi became the country's prime minister in 2021? Here's a quick rundown. Italy emerged from the worst of the European debt crisis in 2014 with precarious public finances and a government debt to GDP of 135.4%. By way of comparison, French debt to GDP was a less concerning 94.9%. Italian debt remained within about a percentage point of 2014 levels until 2020, when government debt spiked to 155.3%. The Italian economy contracted between 2014 and 2019. In this period of economic stagnation, Italy also experienced significant political fragmentation and instability. The country had 3 prime ministers and 4 coalition governments. 2 political parties on the right, the populist Five Star Movement and the center-right regionally oriented Northern League, or Lega Nord, rose to national prominence. In 2018, the Five Star Movement became the largest party in the Italian parliament. The Northern League and Five Star Movement have long been engaged in a convoluted political dance. In 2018, after the general election produced a hung parliament, they cooperated, with Five Star taking the lead in a coalition. At other times, they've stabbed their partner in the back. In 2019, the Northern League withdrew from the coalition, forcing the formation of a new government of strange bedfellows. Indeed, the new government, still headed by Conte and far-right Five Star, required the support of 2 left-wing parties. We all remember when the northern Italian health system was overwhelmed by COVID. So was the economy, and as a consequence, the public finances. In 2020, Italian GDP contracted by 8.9%. Like every other developed economy, the Italian state introduced emergency fiscal stimulus measures to support employment and incomes, leading to a budget deficit of 9.5% of GDP. Similar dynamics of recession and an enlargement of already dangerous levels of public debt occurred in other southern European economies. This led to the potential for another debt crisis. So, in the summer of 2020, EU-level debt was raised for the first time to prevent this, but its distribution came with conditions, and this conditionality created political discord. Due to disagreements over how Italy should use the hundreds of billions of euros it was to be given, Matteo Renzi, prime minister from 2014 to 2016, and head of a party in the coalition government formed in 2019, forced the resignation of Prime Minister Conte in January of 2021. Even so, the coalition still retained a majority in both houses after successive votes of no confidence. A new cabinet, which is required to form a new government, was nearly agreed. But Alessandro Di Battista, head of the right-wing faction of the Five Star Movement, intervened. Italian politics was paralyzed, and at the worst possible time. After many consultations, President Sergio Mattarella invited Mario Draghi, who was endorsed across the political spectrum, to form a new cabinet and a technocratic government of national unity. It seemed like Draghi assumed the premiership almost reluctantly. Yet to the Italian establishment, there was no better person to drag Italy out of its discombobulated politics and precarious economic situation. In 2021, under Draghi's premiership, the deficit rose to 11.8%, but Italy wasn't punished in the capital markets, quite the opposite, and here's why. In April of 2021, Prime Minister Draghi submitted his government's plan to the European Commission for using 222.1 billion euros in funds for investments across the Italian economy for 5 years. Of that, 191.5 billion euros, comprised of a mixture of grants and loans, came from the European Recovery and Resilience Facility. This was a generous allocation. Italy was to receive about 28% of the total money available. But there were strings attached. Draghi promised to reform labor markets, rationalize the judiciary, and to get the government finances under control. He was steadfast in his effort to implement these reforms, and bond markets responded accordingly. But over time, his raucous coalition partners, Five Star and Northern League among them, generally stymied his efforts and pushed for policy antithetical to the conditions tied to the enormous funds Draghi was appointed to secure. As it became more and more apparent that the coalition was unlikely to last, Italian yields went up as investors dumped its debt. The three heavyweights of the coalition, all former prime ministers themselves, pulled the rug out beneath Draghi only a few weeks after the Italian government bond yields spiked. And on the very day that the ECB raised interest rates by 0.5%, the first rate hike in over a decade. This puts Italy and its people in a very delicate situation, and indeed, the Italian people overwhelmingly wanted Draghi to stay. Mario Draghi is now a caretaker prime minister until the next election, scheduled for this autumn. Although he saved the euro, he couldn't implement the structural reforms Italy so clearly requires to access transformational EU funds. If successfully implemented, they'd have not only energized its economy, they'd likely alleviate the political discord that threatens to cleave the nation of Italy into two. Draghi was appointed prime minister, yet those who appointed him frustrated their ostensible intentions. Although his legacy is intact, not even Super Mario could save the present Italy from itself.